Hi everyone, welcome to the ATP project. You're with your host Steve and Nicole, and today we're talking about numbers. I'm a numbers person. There's all these numbers in front of me. There's no scientific papers. Well, there's one.
There's one. Yeah, actually we've only got one scientific paper today. That's a first, isn't it?
Isn't that weird? It's like, but this is a very scientific podcast.
It is very scientific.
This is we're talking all things blood tests.
Yeah, we are.
And we've got some victims in front of us we can talk about. But blood tests, now let's just start from the start. The blood test obviously is ordered by generally a general practitioner or a specialist in that case. And they look for things, markers in your blood, which indicate your health. I'm just starting from the basics. Most people may not know this. But from there, you can test thyroids, kidneys function, liver function, inflammation in the body, all sorts of nutrient deficiencies, all sorts of immune dysregulation, all sorts of markers for disease. Incredible, isn't it?
It is incredible. And we thought we'd do this one today because, I mean, I do a lot of blood testing with my patients.
Yep.
But the things that you see on the bloods that you might not actually know could mean something else.
Yes.
So when we look at, as natural medicine practitioners, we look at bloods very differently to GPs, and so we're going to make it a bit of a distinction about why, and we're not going to be downing them at all because they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And we do what we're supposed to do, and they're just two different things.
Absolutely.
So they're basically sort of looking at the black and white, we're looking more in the grey, working in the grey area. So they're only looking for disease state. So if they don't see disease state, if the markers are within the reference range, which we can talk about reference ranges, that's all they need to know about.
Yeah.
So
and it's very interesting you say, because the training of a doctor, my father-in-law is a doctor. He trained in Sydney University, but his main training was in Sydney Base Hospital. Okay. Now, if you're in hospital, you've usually got something bad going on. So you look at markers for disease. Yeah. What we sort of look at is like, okay, well, we're into prevention of disease, and we try and look at the intricacies. So you haven't got a frank deficiency of something, you've got sort of mild under-functioning something, and you fall in that gap. And I always use the thyroid to start with, and there's a massive range of TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, and if you're at the very, very top of it, you still pass, but it's like saying, how's little Johnny doing at school? Oh, he got a D-, and he passed then. So that's passed, that's fine. Yeah. And you're nothing to worry about there. Don't bother about treating it. Yeah. That's kind of true, isn't it?
That is true. Yeah, exactly. 100%. So that's exactly right. All they need to know is whether you have a disease that needs to be treated. And if you don't, if that doesn't show up on the bloods, then that's all they care about. Yep. So not all they care about, but you know what I mean? That's what they're working on. Whereas as I said, we work in that grey zone. So we want to try and prevent any disease progression or onset even. So if we can see markers in the blood and patterns, then we're going to address that. So that's why we look at the reference ranges a little bit differently. So classic scenario, I have clients come to me and I always ask if they've got any recent blood tests to bring them along with them. And they said, I had them done not long ago. The doctor said they were all fine. And I said, well, bring them along anyway, and we'll have a look. And, 8 out of 10 times I'll find things in them. And that's only not because the doctor's not doing his job. It's because we're looking at them very differently, and we're looking at it from a different perspective. So preventative medicine, and then disease state medicine, so looking at treating disease. So we're not going to down the doctors at all. No,
they do an important job.
Yeah.
The other thing is we've also got to recognise there's a lot of diseases that don't show up in blood tests.
There is, yeah.
Lots of them. Like depression may not show up there unless it's got an organic cause if you're depressed. If you get migraines, cluster headaches, they don't show up in blood tests. No. Because there's special blood tests that we don't do in Australia yet. There's a lot of people, as you said, take those examples you did. They've just been to their doctor, they have blood tests, everything's fine, and you use those words, everything's fine. Yeah. If they're coming to see you, everything's not fine.
That's right.
Something's wrong.
That's right.
You know what it is? Something's wrong. Whatever it is, it's not. It's something is wrong. So your bloods don't tell you everything. And our last podcast we recorded was on cholesterol, which is possibly one of the more common blood tests done. And a lot of and even a staff worker yesterday who we were talking to just before the podcast knew his number for his cholesterol.
Yeah.
And it was remarkable. And most people do. And they say that's an indicator of whatever it is. Now, listen to our podcast if you haven't on that. That was a fascinating podcast.
Well, it hasn't come out yet, but
no.
maybe by the time this comes out, it will have.
It will have, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. So there's things we can look for, and there's things that I like to look for in blood tests, things that you like to look for in blood tests. But I know you've got some blood tests here. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think that we should start with work our way back. So we could talk about reference ranges and how they came about.
Yeah.
We could talk about, before we even get into what some of the markers may mean that people might not realise that they mean, what influences tests, what you should be doing around tests, fasting, non-fasting, what you do that can impact a test negatively that you may not know when you go to get your bloods done. So if you get up and go do a workout and then go get bloods, that can impact the markers and cause false positives or false negatives. So we can go through all of that before we even get into it.
Let's start with reference ranges, because that's got a, like when you do a blood test, and I've got one in front of me and it's very typical, you get a number and after it's got, like a reference range, and, first number here, I'm just looking at this particular test, where this person here is a male, who is overweight, BMI of 29, and the clinical note is struggling to lose weight. So one of the things that we're talking about here is thyroid, and you can see it's 15.1 for free T4. We'll explain all that in a sec. And it's 9 to 200. So it's right within the range. So you get these reference ranges. But where do these reference ranges come from?
Yeah, so there's three different sort of sources of how reference ranges are brought about. So one of the ways is what they call in-house. So that's basically from the actual lab themselves. So they've taken a huge cohort of people and they've tested them all, and then they've worked out averages. So that's basically coming from so people that are going to that lab clearly are not 100% well anyway. So what are those reference ranges really indicating? Are they indicating, a sick person or a well person? So that's one way. Another way is external, so published references. So they'll go on what they're looking at in the literature when they come up with their markers. So one of them, say, thyroid liver function test is one that can come from that source. And then decision limits. So this one is when a scientific consensus about cutoff values. So things like your C-reactive protein, things like that. So sometimes on a test you'll get it's less than 5.
Like less than 6 or 5 for the CRP.
Yeah. So that could well be 4.9
I know.
or 0.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little bit harder. So can be a little bit grey zone as well. So there's sort of three different sort of areas as how you can get reference ranges. So so then we sort of have to try extrapolate from all of those different ways that they've established these ranges, where our patients should sit in those depending on what they've come to us and presented with. Wow. So it's kind of not a matter of just looking at the test and reading the numbers. You've got to do a lot of mathematics in your head. You've got to take into consideration your client. You've got to take into consideration their presenting symptoms, and then sort of connect them to what's going on in the blood. So if you get, some random marker on the blood that doesn't correlate with what you're seeing in front of you, I'm not going to turn around and go, well, this is wrong, let's treat this. So we have to then sort of connect all the dots to get a good picture.
So you're not just treating a number, you're treating the person.
That's right.
That's very important.
Yeah.
That's a really important point. Now, you mentioned CRP, it's called C-reactive protein. It's a protein released from the liver when it's acted upon by a cytokine called interleukin-6. Interleukin-6 is a non-specific inflammatory marker from the immune system. So when you get a cold or a flu, CRP goes up. When you got crippling arthritis like I had, CRP level, mine was in triple figures.
Wow.
Yeah, it went over 100. Because I remember the doctor saying if your ESR and CRP don't drop below 100, we're going to have to put you on steroids. And I just, 20-year-old me, not trained in this, I just went, I don't want to go on steroids. Now I'm 54 and old. I want to go on steroids, but different ones. But that's for another podcast. But I remember it always being over 100 because I was absolutely. But it's a non-specific marker for any sort of inflammation.
That's right.
So, if I'd got an infection in my toe, that'd raise CRP.
Yeah.
If I got an infection anywhere, or I had arthritis or an autoimmune or anything like that, and mine was autoimmune. So it's a really interesting test, but it's non-specific.
It doesn't tell us anything specific. So that's when we've got to start connecting dots and looking at other markers and what the client is telling us to come up with some sort of strategy and what's going on. So
it's funny that the CRP also, now there's a new test called highly sensitive CRP, which is a way better test because it can reach below 6 and look at the, and you remember your CRP should be below 1.
Yes, it should be. Yeah. Ideally you want it to be 0, so there's no inflammation, and that's where that sort of that range of it's definitely below 5 or it's below 6, but that's not telling us much.
So it's a really good marker for heart disease.
Yes,
really good marker. One of my friends, Henry Osiki, wrote a paper on that, really interesting, just on the marker CRP in 2004. Didn't bring it in here, but should have. Now I think of it. But great, smart guy. Jeez.
Yeah, he's amazing, Henry Osiki. He's a one of the forefathers of our industry.
Can I plug my book now that I wrote with him?
You know what? We didn't plug your book when we did the cholesterol episode,
Where's my
Steve-o.
book? I know. Actually, it's part...
I thought about that. I thought about bringing it in.
I've got a copy on my desk.
Yeah, Steve-o's an author.
Can't self-promote. Yeah, with Henry.
Yeah, with Henry. Well, still, it's pretty
impressive.
It is pretty impressive.
Yeah. It does well with ones with the ladies, let me tell you.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. You take your book under your under your arm when you go out and about in town.
Go on a Tinder date and I carry my book. Oh, yes, I'm an author, published. It's not like Stephen King or anything. It's wrong, Stephen. It's just a boring one in cardiovascular disease.
Bit drier than the Stephen King novels, but anyway.
But it'll help you live longer if you read it.
That's right.
Yeah, all right. So you've got these blood tests and you've got these weird ranges that are all based a little bit grey. It's a little bit grey, isn't it?
It is grey, yes.
Now they use the thing, and someone may go maths on you, but they use a thing called a bell curve. Now, if you've ever seen a bell curve, it's the shape of a bell. And I'll draw the camera. It's like a bell, okay? It's like that. Now, inside this area is where 97.5% of people are if there's one standard deviation out of it.
Yep.
So you could be anywhere within that 97% range and still be considered normal. But if you're at the extreme ends of it, you're not really normal.
No, you're not. And that's how I look at it when I take notes with bloods. I'll go low normal, high normal. Yeah. So you're on the outskirts of the range, but you're on the high normal end. So that's something we need to look at. Yeah. So that bell curve, it's great for orthodox medicine. Just as long as you're in it, you're fine. But
fine.
If you're on the outskirts, it can be a little bit of an
And I'll
issue.
defend the docs for a second. Remember, they train in a hospital. They look for sickness.
That's right, yeah.
So, I don't know if it's their field to look after, preventative medicine. I mean, they do agree. We're talking about a PSA test later, which is a prostate, and you can therefore detect early. Yeah. But we go back even earlier. We give people healthy diets to protect against prostatic cancer, such as cutting out dairy. Yeah. It's a big one, and sugars. So we go beyond that beforehand. But you've got some interesting stuff here with the different ranges, and what sort of factors influence the pathology of the results?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of things that can, as I said before, influence your results. Yep. So generally when I talk to clients, I give them instructions, or I send them instructions of actually what to do around the test. Yeah. Do they fast? Do they not fast? Do they exercise? Don't exercise? Yeah. Those sorts of things can have a significant impact. Time of the day. So if we're testing for particular markers, you want to be doing it at a particular time of the day. So it's not a case of just get your referral and go into the
We should go these through one at a time. But just for an example, when's the blood draw? Most lipids, like cholesterols and that sort of thing, you do fasting.
Yes.
First thing in the morning.
Yeah.
But if you're checking for EBV or Epstein-Barr virus, then you can test that any time of day.
Yeah.
So there's different tests for different times of day. Any amino acid-based test, so if you're testing for homocysteine, it's an amino acid complex, and not a real nice one either. You want that fasting. Yeah. Because, that's got amino acids in. Otherwise, you consume a bunch of amino acids, make homocysteine for a bit. And triglycerides. Yeah. If you just have a big bread sandwich, your trigs will go up dramatically.
That's right.
It's called postprandial hyperlipidemia.
Yeah. Which in some instances isn't a bad thing. No. If we're looking at something specific. Yep. So sometimes having something to eat and then getting your lipids done can show us.
Time of day, that's interesting.
Yeah, time of day. So if we're looking at things like, say, your cortisol, we want to get your AM cortisol. I do saliva cortisol primarily, but if we're doing blood, sometimes it's easy just to get a bit of a marker, a bit of an idea. So you want to do your AM cortisol because you want to see that's where it should be the highest of the day. So I usually say to people, first thing in the morning, get to the lab sort of within that hour of waking up, getting out of bed. But people might get it because I see, a wide variety of group of people that are quite fit. So they'll get up and do a workout and then go get their test done and their cortisol's through the roof. And I'm like, hang on a minute. This is not, you're super
You're not a
stressed.
stress head, are you?
Yeah. So they're things you need to take into consideration. TSH, that type of thing, in the morning. So they're all, but pretty much I recommend everyone test in the morning because you want to make it easy as well.
Yes.
Test in the morning and fast because pretty much most markers are better taken fasted. They're more accurate.
And then next time you do a test, you can do it at the same time.
That's right.
And also for guys like me who want to test, say, my hormones, testosterone, that spikes in the morning.
Yeah.
So you want to be there to get the optimal or the highest amount so as then you can intervene and do it later.
Exactly.
So very interesting. But so first thing in the morning, and you mentioned cortisol there.
Yeah.
It's interesting that cortisol drops to blood results in the evenings close to zero.
Yeah.
And yet in the morning they spike. And that's a typical human diurnally rhythm.
Exactly.
And salivary tests are interesting because, we are talking about blood tests today, but and I'll give you an example about cortisol because cortisol can be, there's a girl that goes to my gym, she works there behind the counter and she knows I'm for ATP and she said, what are you talking about today? And I said, I'm doing blood tests. And she just went, oh, I hate blood tests, and literally had a reaction when I mentioned the B word in front of her, blood.
No.
So if you wanted to measure her cortisol levels and you sent her for a blood test, they'd be high.
They would be high.
Because she would be stressing. And she really, she says, last time I had it, I passed out. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Extreme, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is.
Some people do react like that to needles.
I react like that when my wife says, do you want to go clothes shopping? I go, go. Oh, I can't stand.
You feel your credit card heating up in your back pocket.
Not only that, I feel my brain shrinking to the size of a pea. I just can't. But so different things stress people out.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a needle phobe, then blood tests are not appropriate for you to measure your cortisol. You have to do salivary tests.
That's right.
And everyone can spit in the tube 4 times a day. It's 4 times a day or 3?
4 times a day, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so that's that. Recent food intake, obviously with the lipids we talked about. Medications or supplements.
That's interesting.
That's an interesting. People don't think of that a lot of the time. So if we're measuring, say B12 and someone's on a high dose B12 supplement, you're not going to get a super accurate.
And what if they're
reading.
on metformin?
Well, then their blood sugars.
B12.
Yes, well, that's true. Yeah, it does deplete B12. So antibiotics as well. So that can, and other medications can spike your liver markers.
Yep.
So then you think,
paracetamol even.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you might have woken up with a bit of a hangover that morning and you're going to get your liver tested because you're a bit of a heavy drinker and you pile up a gram of paracetamol, which is 2 tablets, and all of a sudden your liver enzymes rise.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it can really, and I'm picking on Panadol because it's the simplest, easiest thing to take. Everyone takes it. So incredible. What else are there? What else?
So was the patient sick? I get this a bit. Was the patient sick leading up to the bloods? That sounds strange when you're getting blood tests. But if you've had a virus or a cold and you're not going in specifically for an immune issue, and then your immune markers are spiking, so they'll spike. And I have that all the time. I say to clients, hang on, what happened? What happened back in this month? Because we'll talk about patterns and sort of long goals, looking at previous markers as well. But so what happened here? Were you sick? Because that's my first thing. Were you sick? Because these have spiked. Because if you weren't sick and everything was fine, then we need to look at the reasons why your white cell count has gone up or something spiked. So that's another one. So if you've been sick leading up to it, that's something. Also, we talk about time of the day, but when we're talking about hormones, particularly women's hormones, times of your cycle, time of the month.
Because you guys are all over the place.
Yeah.
You really are.
That's right. So we need to capture different hormones at different times of the month.
So typically day 14 you want LH and FSH when your day spike.
Yeah, that's right.
This is if you've got a cycle.
That's right.
A lot of women don't. They're underage or overage. So,
progesterone is, sort of that third
21,
week in, basically, day 21. I say day 19 to 21.
Yeah.
And then your estrogen sort of the first week of your cycle. Yeah. So that you kind of got to establish that as well. So it's not a matter. And a lot of times women will go in and get their hormones done through the doctor, and the doctors said, oh, no, that they're actually fine, but you're looking at the wrong part of the cycle, so they're actually not fine.
Yeah.
When you're looking
You've got bugger all progesterone on day 21. It's like, whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that can that's something you need to take into consideration.
And the reference ranges for the female hormones are astronomical.
Yeah, it's another one. They're huge.
It's like from 1 to 1,000,000.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating for us,
Yeah.
but they're really, and it just shows the variation between the same species.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And then you've got a very important test for women, of course, is also not just the female sex hormones, but testosterone.
Yeah.
And high androgens, DHA, and all this sort of stuff. And I hope that they're tested in women because I think they're under-tested because a lot of women...
They don't generally test as a general rule. You have to ask specifically for them. Yeah. And we'll talk about the reasons why they may not do certain markers when you ask them as well. But that's not a standard. Standard for females, and I have to say now even female hormones are not standard anymore either. There is a bit of kickback with women getting their estrogen, progesterone checked. I've had clients say to me their doctor won't test them because they don't need them tested. So even that's a bit of a struggle, but definitely androgens for women, no. You'd have to ask for them specifically.
Yeah, that's important. 1 in 7 women have polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is marketed by high androgens.
Yeah.
And if women don't know they've got high androgens, it can lead to depression and all sorts of terrible things, and defeminisation and weight gain around the waist, hirsutism, which is facial hair, deeper voices, and lose femininity, which is terrible for women. It's very interesting. A couple of things there you talked about there, which I went, oh, that's interesting. And about, like, for example, you mentioned viruses. Now a lot of people may not know this, but viruses increase the immune system.
They do. Well, you would hope they do. Because if they don't, then you've got another problem. Yeah.
You've got, when you see a panel of an immune panel, you've got leukocytes, neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, and I can't remember the other field. So you get all these things, and some of them can be spiked, and some of them are spiked when you've got allergies too.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about all about that and what they mean. So what they can indicate that you may not think that they're indicating outside of sort of just your general immunity. Yep. So before we get into that, and this is, I've got a little table here.
Go through that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so this is basically talking about if you are instructed to do a fasting blood test and you haven't fasted adequately or enough.
That midnight snack.
Yeah, the midnight snack. That can falsely increase a lot of your nutrients. So your bicarb, urea, creatinine, ALP, ALT, so your liver markers. White cell count, that can be falsely increased.
Yep.
And then things like bilirubin, zinc, your glomerular filtration rate.
That's a kidney function test,
and iron gap, they can actually be falsely decreased.
Wow.
So that shows the importance if you've been, if someone's asked you to do fasted testing, probably try and do that. And when we're talking fasted, and that also comes into play, you don't want to over-fast either because then that can throw out some other markers.
They really go for the 10-hour things, don't they?
Yeah, 10 hours, 10 to 12, no more than 12, I would say, maximum of 12.
So if you want to get up for 6 a.m. blood test at the local, which is what most people do, they're lined up out the front, try and eat the last thing is about 7 p.m.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so excessive fasting, so that's when you're going, as I said, too long. Iron can be significantly impacted. So that will go up, and it can go up quite a lot. So I've had people that maybe fast 16 hours go, I fasted 16, 17 hours. Their iron, their ferritin things have gone through the roof, and their free iron have gone through the roof. So ferritin, stored iron and free iron. So it would be the free iron that would go up, wouldn't it? Yeah, it goes up. Wow. So because your body thinks you're starving all of a sudden and there's a disaster, we've got to put some iron in the blood. So that's really common, actually, and I see iron levels quite high, and I asked them how long they fasted, and they said, so that's one. Cortisol, obviously, is another one because it activates the stress response. Yep. Prolactin, it also can go up fairly significantly. Yeah, it can go up.
Prolactin's an enemy hormone. That's one bad thing for men that get high, and women.
And women, women don't want high prolactin either.
Only when you're breastfeeding. No, it makes you feel really sad.
Yeah.
And, like the postpartum depression is largely related to prolactin.
Yeah, it can cause anovulation, ovulatory cycles, things like that. So weight gain, all sorts of things.
Impotence in men too.
Impotence in men, yeah.
Why are you pointing at me when you said that?
I didn't. I didn't, Steve. Just looking at you because you're the only one in the room. So there's one other person in the room. Exercise prior to collection, as I said, that can impact it as well. So it can impact your liver markers, your lactate dehydrogenase, urea, your T3.
How does it affect my ear?
Urea. Well, that's no, not my ear. Not my ear either.
No, it's your ear.
Urea. So that dehydration. So,
Yep.
and that's a really common one, really, really common one. People don't drink enough before they go. And so that can concentrate some of the markers as well.
Yeah.
I found that to be the case.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so sodium can go up, albumin, hemoglobin, your platelet count, that sort of thing can go up, can become falsely elevated.
Concentrates your blood, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So that's a pretty common one that we get. So,
The next one's common for most Australians.
Yeah, that is.
Shit.
Alcohol intake up to 2 days before even the testing can falsely increase your GGT, your iron, transferrin saturation.
Wow.
So yeah, things you don't really think about.
Nasty.
Yeah. And then there is another one where poor collection and sample handling. So that's more the lab. So something they've done not right can impact things as well. And sometimes you can tell if there has been an issue on the lab side or the collection side where the marker is just wildly out of range and it doesn't fit a picture. And that's when you can contact the lab and say, hey, something's happened.
Wow.
A lot of the times, most of the time, labs will hold on to your bloods for 7 days.
Yes.
So you can order it to be retested again and hopefully get the correct, more accurate levels. So yeah, that's so there's a lot to think about when you're going to get your bloods done. It's not just a matter of just waltzing in there. And if you want to get them the most accurate picture.
And here's the ethical issue. You mentioned you want to get your bloods done. There's a paper there. It's actually a qualitative study. I'm going to be honest. I don't like qualitative studies.
No.
I've got a thing with them. I know I'd studied them and everything, and they're supposed to be great. But it's all about feelings. Okay, and I'm left brain, I admit it. I'm about the facts and black and white and a bit like that. So criticism, but this is about the attitudes. And what they did in this particular study was interesting, where they surveyed the attitudes of patients who went to get their bloods test. Now, a lot of people have Google on their phone and they can sort of have a guess of what's wrong with them, and that's fine. They might say, gee, I look like I've got low thyroid. I'm going to get my thyroid tested. And you go to the doctor, and this study shows that a lot of times the doctor will say, nah, we won't bother testing for that.
Yeah.
We will test for your iron levels or something because you're a woman and you menstruate and, it's more likely, whatever. And the study shows that a lot of people aren't getting the test they want. Now, we live in Australia, and we have Medicare, and Medicare bulk bills them. So the taxpayer pays for those tests.
Yes.
So, but then you've got the other side of the coin where a doctor has to be accountable for those tests. So we have this dichotomy. The doctor would probably like to test everyone for everything all the time, just to make sure, cover everything off and do it to every test, and it blows the budget out and costs us $1 million. So there's this dichotomy, isn't there?
Yeah,
and I don't know what the answer is, but
what's the answer? Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing. Clients come to me and they're very frustrated because the doctor won't order a lot of these tests. But it's, as you said, it's not their fault. A lot of the time, they do have their hands tied. Medicare has restricted. So Medicare allows a certain amount of tests to be bulk billed.
Yes.
And they're actually reducing it. So each year it seems to be less and less that they'll actually cover.
Australia's broke, by the way. If you want to look up our books, we're broke.
Yeah, that's right.
We're in debt everywhere. If there's debt in the state and federal level. So the bureaucrats are going, hang on a second.
That's
because
right.
you got to remember that a GP could easily, if they see a patient every 15 minutes, which is not uncommon, order blood tests on most of them.
Yeah.
And they see about, 50 to 100 a day, whatever it is. There's a lot of blood tests they're ordering, and some of them are expensive to do.
Some are very expensive. The only solution that I have is that, well, I usually do, because I can order bloods as well, but because I'm not a general practitioner, it's not covered by Medicare.
Yeah.
So anything I order, the patient has to pay for.
Yep.
So I generally say to my clients, look, if it is a lot of money, because it can be a lot of money, they can add up, go to your GP first and ask them, and I usually send them a list of things to ask for, and then whatever we get, we get. So the GP is going to say yes, no, yes, no. And if I find there's any in there that weren't done that I think are very important for what we're looking at for the case, I will then order them myself. So then the client will pay for those out of pocket. But we can't get angry at the GP because they're doing what they've been told to do for the most part. So
they'll get audited.
Yeah.
They'll be in trouble for overprescribing a certain drug or overprescribing I've got a friend, I won't mention who does surgeries. And so all he prescribed was basically, because he was mainly a surgeon, was opioids. That's all because he did surgery and give them opioids because they're recovering, which is completely, by the way, we bag out opioids here, but that's exactly what they're for, short-term pain relief, no problem at all. But because he was only prescribing opioids,
he got in trouble.
He got a call.
Okay.
Why are you prescribing all these opioids and nothing? Like if I was a GP and I was in practice and about 5% of my scripts for opioids, they would go, whatever, that's normal.
Yeah.
But like about 100% of his, it's a bit dodgy. But he is not the greatest friend of the authorities, so he gave him grief on the phone. He said, well, if I ever do surgery, I won't give you any pain relief, I promise. So it was all ended pretty badly, but it was quite funny in a way.
Oh, gee.
But yeah, that's a funny story. I remember. But because they're checked upon, it's not like because what the doctor is doing is authorising taxpayers' money to be spent.
Yes,
and it may be completely legit.
Yeah. Or
the doctor might think, why are we testing you for X, Y, Z? You've clearly got no clinical reason for me to do that.
Yeah.
And therefore I've got to account for that test.
That's right. Yeah.
So, there's got to be a good reason.
Yeah.
So,
that's right.
but you mentioned the pain thing. So let's say, and this is what I do, and I go to the doctor and I'll ask for some blood tests, and the doctor will go, I say, look, just charge me for it.
Yeah. And you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know, you may not have the money for that. But if you do and you really want that test, say, charge me, and then the doctor goes, no worries, and it's not bulk billed.
I have had that happen in that people have paid for the test and then they haven't done the test anyway. So you've got to be careful. So
really?
And if it's come back and the test isn't on there, and so I say to the client, did you order? They said, yes, I paid for it and everything. So then I get them to ring the lab and say, hey, I have paid for the test, follow up and get the test done. So they will then do the test. So you've got to be careful, make sure that they're actually going to do the test. So that's not an uncommon thing either. Yeah,
but if you pay for a drink and you don't get it.
Yeah. Because they don't know until the tests come back, do they, whether that's been tested or not. So that can be part of it. So, and the other option is, I'll order the testing and then they go straight to the pathology collection centre and do that, but it's all out of pocket. So, and some clients are happy to do that and some aren't, and it's either way, whatever works best.
And you pay for the phlebotomist too in that case.
Yeah.
So that's why I liked it. But yeah, it's very tricky. But I mean, a lot of doctors won't give you, because a lot of people only go to the doctors and say, I'm going to make something out, but fatigued. And it's like, okay, so the doctor would screen therefore for, say, thyroid, iron levels, and maybe a few viruses, or do a virus panel. But there's only 3. There's millions of reasons why you're tired.
There is, yeah.
You could just be stressed out to the eyeballs, adrenal fatigue and all this sort of stuff. So, you end up testing for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So you've got to pick the main possibilities and that sort of thing.
Right.
But it is tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky. Yeah, really
but
tricky.
what do you do? But and you also mentioned about high low and low high, so that becomes a bit interesting.
Yeah.
So what factors do you consider when you're interpreting the results?
So one of the big ones that I do is I look for patterns. So as I said, we've got a blood test. We haven't blotted out the name, so I can't hold it up.
But just
from a lab. So I might get. So it depends. If someone goes from one lab to the next, you won't get the previous results from that lab. So this one in front of me here. So I've got results from January 21 up to 8th of February 23.
Yep.
So I look at all those markers and I look for a pattern. So over the course of that, 2 years, is there any spikes in particular markers? Is there something that doesn't look right? Is there a progression of something that looks like it's the markers are increasing or something's happening over that time? So that's something I will always look out for. I'll always question a marker that doesn't fit with what the patient has come to me for, and that's when I'll question, is there a false negative or a false positive? Is there something wrong with the collection? It just doesn't fit at all. So that's when we're saying don't treat the marker. So that's something I always take into consideration as well. And then on the bloods themselves, there's quite a lot of information if you're looking outside the actual markers that the pathology lab uses. So they'll always note whether it's you fast or whether it's a random test, so whether you've eaten. So that's one of them. And something else I always look out for is the hemolysis index.
Oh, okay.
So that's something you can look out for. And most labs will list that.
Yep.
So that's an indication of whether it's a good sample or a bad sample. basically.
Should be below 40 for those people.
It should be below 40, yeah.
So it should be below 10. But
yeah, ideally below 10. So if you've got a results back and your hemolysis index is quite high, then it's useless because it means that the markers are not accurate. So, the red blood cells are sort of spilling into the blood. So it creates some very significant.
So when you do a phlebotomy, you take the blood, you put it in a tube, and it's got a little stuff at the bottom which keeps it like, I think it's ethylene diaminotetraacetic acid.
I was going to say that, Steve.
No, that just keeps it, from. It's the same stuff you put in soap to make soap lavender up when you're in hard water.
Too. Yeah.
We used to add it to soap when I was a chemist in the olden days.
Yeah, that's right. You were a soap maker.
But you can also inject it into your veins to clean out your arteries.
Right.
Remember last week we talked about calcium?
Yes.
To decalcify, ethylene diaminotetraacetic acid gets rid of the calcification.
Okay.
It's a interesting.
I think it'd be the almost ideal way to do it, but I think there's probably better ways to do it. Wow.
They do it in hospital to get rid of metals out of the body. Like if you get mercury poisoning, the treatment.
Well, in that instance, you don't want mercury floating around your system for too long, do you?
But it'll also rip out all your minerals. So
don't do that, people at home. Don't do that. If
I don't think they'll do it at home. I think they'll be backing up to
heavy metal issues.
Interesting. So you've got this. So let's have a look at this blood test here. This is a very interesting, the one you've got here.
Yeah.
This is a woman who's about 10 years older than me. So she's pretty old then.
She must be ancient, jeez.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
So, no, she'd be about 65.
Yes, okay, yeah.
So she's had blood tests here. Let's just call her Jane. It's not her real name, of course.
Call her Jane, yeah.
She's got super B12 levels, which is...
Yeah, well, that's actually why I pulled this one out, because we're going to go through some of the markers and what they can indicate, as I said, that we look for that may not be what the doctor looks at the marker. We'll look at it for something completely different. But I did pull this one out because her B12 levels were quite high. So 1,461.
360 or 380 is considered replete, and you should be above about 150.
Yeah, that's right.
So but hers is 1,000.
1,461. So the GPs looked at that and said, B12 is fine.
Yeah.
Like, don't take any supplements or anything. Your B12 is fine. But actually what's happening is she's B12 deficient. She's not absorbing any of that. So it's just floating around her bloodstream. She's not taking any of it in.
Wow.
So she's severely B12 deficient. But on her blood test, you would say, wow, she's got so much B12. So it depends on how you look at it.
Is she African-American by any stretch?
She's not African-American, no.
Because they're more prone for sickle cell anemia.
No, she has quite a lot of
pernicious
significant
anemia
issues.
or...
No, well, she has malabsorption issues, obviously. She has, obviously, MTHFR, which 50% of the population does. Methylation
which one of those?
Look, I can't remember offhand.
There's two of them.
Got me on that. I can't remember what.
Just for those who know, that's called the methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase polymorphism, and there's 667 or 1296. So it's one of those two.
It's one of those two. I can't remember which one. And then the other thing I would look at on this, which I'm not going to be able to find it. So then, if I see issues with B12 that I'm thinking, that looks unusual, I'll then check the mean cell volume. So mean cell volume can give you an indication of your B12.
It's called MCV?
If her MCV. So if her MCV is quite high, then that's indicating that she is B12 deficient.
Right.
So, but I can't find the mean cell volume on this one. Maybe we can push that. But anyway, so that's something I will always look at. So if your mean cell volume is above 97, that's an indication of B12 deficiency.
Yes.
And if it's low, so if it's below 87.
Yeah.
It's iron deficiency anemia.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah.
So very interestingly, she also has the MTHFR, which I won't say what the nickname of that one is called because we'll be kicked off the air. But that stops folate attaching a methyl group to B12.
Yeah.
So and then the B12 takes the methyl group to the homocysteine and turns it back to methionine in the esteradenylmethionine pathway. So with the B12 problems, the folate problems, she could have hyperhomocystinemia, which is destructive for the brain and the heart.
Yep.
My mother has got hyperhomocystinemia, and I had to pay for a blood test years ago with her because they didn't do it. Now it's bulk billed.
Yeah.
But hers was super high, and because Alzheimer's ran in her side of the family.
Yeah.
Her mum died of terrible Alzheimer's, my grandmother. And the grandmother had homocysteine of 48 when she passed. I remember because I finally got them to test it. And they went, that's remarkable. And my mother's was high, now it's low because I got a treatment.
Yeah.
which is interesting. So
so that's something, and I have tested her homocysteine levels, and they were below 10.
Really?
So that's where I go back to malabsorption, and also the form. You've got to look at the form of B12 that you're using as well. Some people.
There's methylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, cyanocobalamin.
Yeah, so cyanocobalamin is the one you don't really want.
That's the normal one too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that one is not overly absorbable at all. So I use methylcobalamin a lot. I use, oh my God, I've had a mental blank. Methylcobalamin a lot anyway, I use. But yeah, checked her homocysteine levels for that reason, and they were okay.
Good.
But she has a lot of stress, that sort of strong thing. So then we can go into, I would go back and look at her electrolyte balance, and I can tell a lot from her electrolyte balance in regards to her adrenal health.
Oh, yes.
So if I look at sodium levels, and her sodium levels are either very high or quite low, that can indicate some sort of adrenal, something going wrong with the adrenals. So generally I look at sodium over about 142 as looking like there's some sort of stress response. The adrenals are reacting. And below 135 would be the opposite. So you've got more of that fatigue sort of picture with the adrenals. So
she's okay, but one thing I noticed on the same page as her is she's had a random glucose test, so it's during the day, I think at 151, but look at that, and it's 7.8. So she could have just had bad lunch.
Yes.
Like a sandwich.
Yeah.
Or she could be stressed, the eyeballs, because it's releasing glucose.
Yeah, and in this particular case, she's both. There was both, because I questioned, and that's where you say, well, okay, what did you eat? How long did you eat before you had the test? What did you eat to establish why that had gone a little bit high? And she is stressed to the eyeballs, so there's also that factor that's going to push that blood sugar up as well. So they're the sort of things that you got to go, okay, well, now that's high. I'm not just going to go automatically think, okay, well, you've got some insulin issues. I'm going to establish the reason as to why it's high first, as what the situation was around the test, before I look further and start to connect that to other things. And obviously I know her case, so she does have a lot of stress, but she doesn't have insulin resistance.
Okay.
So that's interesting with that. So
it's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So you're
so much to this.
There's so much to it, yeah. So your electrolyte balance can tell us a lot.
Yeah.
High potassium, low sodium. That could be Addison's disease. You know Addison's disease?
Addison's is an incredible disease. It's funny, a friend of mine named their kid Addison, and I went, It's worse. I knew someone called Melina, which is Latin for blood in your poo.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And there is. I'm not joking either. I wish I was joking. And then
do they know that now?
And you know Dick Johnson, the racing car driver?
Yeah.
He's got a son called Stephen Johnson. Okay?
Okay.
Now, there's a rare disease called Stephen Johnson syndrome.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Isn't that a classic?
Oh, my mum's got a friend called Peter Rabbit.
Peter what?
Rabbit.
Peter Rabbit? Now you're making shit up.
I swear to God, I'm not making that up.
Peter Rabbit?
His parents must have hated him. His name's Peter Rabbit.
Almost as bad as Teresa Green.
Teresa Green. All right.
Let's
move into Simpsons territory. We can go on for days.
Oh, Simpsons territory. I love that.
Yeah, we can go on for days.
That is funny. But,
yeah. So Addison's disease, low potassium, that can indicate a B5 deficiency.
Yep.
So we're looking at those types of things.
So Addison's is an adrenal gland disease.
Yeah, adrenal gland disease, sodium potassium ratios, that can indicate blood sugar issues. So we're not just looking at your electrolyte balance for the sake of it. So we can pick out all these other things and start to build a bit of a picture and a pattern around the markers. So that's sort of your electrolyte ones that we look at. Bicarb, you want to look at it to be over about 26.
Yeah, you want it to
ideally.
be pretty high, yep.
You don't want too much acidity or alkalinity.
Nope.
So that's something that we look at as well.
Yep.
Calcium's an interesting one, actually.
Well, why is that interesting?
Well, because a lot of people come to me and they say, oh, no, my calcium levels are fine. I mean, this is not measuring the calcium in your bones.
No.
So that's something that people forget. It's measuring in your blood. So I look at calcium levels when I'm looking at any issues with their parathyroid gland. So hyperparathyroidism, you'll see high calcium in the blood. Yeah,
very dangerous having high calcium in the blood.
It is, yeah.
And it's a sign of osteoporosis too.
It is. So that's when I have clients come to me that have osteoporosis or osteopenia, I'll get their parathyroid glands checked just to see if that might be a cause.
They're glands that regulate the calcium in your blood.
Yeah. That's right. So they'll pull
patting
more
my throat,
calcium.
but but people aren't watching, so that's fair enough.
Yeah, so they'll pull the calcium out of the bone and put it in the blood.
Right.
Yeah, so you don't want that. And so my grandma had osteoporosis. She had the big hump on her back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she had parathyroid issues. So, yeah.
They call it the Dowitcher's hump.
Yeah, she got smaller and smaller as she got older.
You see it quite commonly.
Yeah.
Cushing's, you get a Dowitcher's hump too, which is another adrenal gland. Yeah.
Yeah, right at the base of your neck.
I would love. I mean, I wonder if the early surgeons, someone grew a lump on them. What would the early surgeons done? They'd just cut it
off. Yeah.
The early surgeries that are based on the clinics and that is fat. We could do a podcast on that. Well, I mean, early dodgy surgeries.
Yeah. Well, look at the things that they were cutting out of people that they said they don't do anything. Tonsils, appendix, and then we now know they actually have a very significant function.
Whoops. But, I mean, if they need to come out, they come out.
Oh, of course, if they need to. But
they were sort of like, if they were in the area.
Let's just go do a 2-for-1 deal.
It's not a very...
What else does he need?
But it's like these imagine, like, those tight muscles you get in your back, that was surgically incised too.
Really?
Yeah, those lumps you get where you get your thumb in the massage, and you just feel those lumps there.
They just cut them out.
Oh,
wow.
They're incredibly painful things. Why not lop it out?
Why not?
I mean, it's incredible. It really is incredible.
Crazy. Phosphate. So we look at phosphate. You don't want that to be too high because that will pull calcium out of your bones as well. Yep. So that's some interesting ones. What else? I've got loads on here. Urea.
Oh, yeah.
So urea levels can tell us a few interesting things as well. So if it's quite high, that can indicate that you can have some parasites.
Yeah.
So that one's a pretty common one.
We have to avoid your favourite B vitamin on this one, don't we?
My favourite B vitamin, B6.
B12?
Oh, B12. Oh, B6 is my favourite B6.
Is it? Oh, is that your favourite one?
It's my favourite one, yeah.
So you got a favourite B vitamin?
I like B6. Does a lot of really good things.
Yeah.
But I like B12 as well.
Yeah.
It's a very important one, B12.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But then this is where I look at the client again in front of me because it can indicate parasites. It can also indicate someone on a very high protein diet. So do you sit there and say, well, you've got parasites when they may be just on a very high protein diet, athlete perhaps. So that can be it. H. pylori. You can see it go up with Helicobacter pylori, so that can go up with that as well, and muscle breakdown as well. So obviously training, that type of thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of different things that can come from one marker. So you can't just look at it and go, oh, okay, well that just means that, because it can mean so many different things.
Well, you've got here high uric acid, which can be in gut inflammation, which it can.
Yeah.
What if you got gout? You probably got high uric acid.
That's right. Yeah. What about low urea? So we're talking about high urea, low urea. So we see low urea in people who are on a plant-based diet.
Yeah, obviously vegans, got to watch them.
Vegans. Detox issues or methylation issues, that can cause it to go down. Yep. It uses a lot of glutathione, which is an antioxidant the body makes in the liver. So there's some things that we need to look at further than just one marker meaning one thing.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is amazing. So we've got more. Where else? I can keep going.
Pages of it.
Oh, so the anion gap, we do look at the anion gap.
That's for acidity and pH regulation?
Yep, that's right. So you want that to be sort of between 8 and 12. So it's sort of outside those ranges. Again, you could be shifting more to acidic or alkalinity. So we want to make sure that they're in range.
Yep.
What else have we got? Oh, my goodness, I've got so many. Bilirubin's an interesting one.
Bilirubin is an interesting one. That's a browny substance you see, in the bile.
That's what makes your poop brown.
My poop brown, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you know?
I'm just guessing that your poop's brown. I'm hoping it's brown.
You're 110% correct. and that's bilirubin concentrating in the bile duct, and the bile duct squirts it out to digest things. Yeah. And, gets brown.
Yeah.
Wow.
So not only does
potent antioxidant too, isn't it?
It is a potent antioxidant, and that's where we look at it. So so if your bilirubin levels are ideally 8 to 10 is where you want to see them. It is an antioxidant marker. Mm-hmm. So low levels can indicate that you're burning through glutathione. So obviously glutathione, as I said, it's an antioxidant. So that can indicate that you've got, say, some oxidative stress, some other issues. Smokers, it can be a little bit on the low side as well. So that oxidative stress, overtraining. So that can be one thing. So and then bilirubin has some other functions, so thyroid as well. So it's involved in thyroid function as well, involved in the conversion from T4 to T3 bilirubin. Yeah, so we look at that with thyroid.
Yeah.
What else do we look at it for? Estrogen issues as well. So it's a risk for heart disease. So the menopause, so low estrogen, you can see your bilirubin drop sometimes there as well.
Wow.
So bilirubin can tell us quite a bit about your, antioxidant status, how much oxidative stress you have going on in your body. So if it's quite depleted, you'll see it drop down. And interestingly, I see it when I treat clients, and you watch it go down and start to come up when we start to work on that oxidative stress and that type of thing. You'll see it come up. So
nice.
It's a way to measure how well treatments are going as well, looking at these markers.
It's great.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And you've got Gilbert syndrome or something.
Gilbert syndrome,
stuff all bilirubin.
Yeah, you don't have much bilirubin. Yeah, they can have issues, mental health issues, gut issues.
Yeah, jeez, that's a shocker.
It is a shocker.
Oh,
so yeah.
God, you got any others?
I can keep going. God, I can keep going.
We can pick some of the more common ones. Like what are some of the real ones? Like I'm just going to jump a few here and go to iron.
Yeah.
Okay, ferritin is stored iron in the body. And you want it to be around 100. The range is 30 to 300. And I see people that are 32 and they're fine.
Yes.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
At least intervene by saying have a couple more steaks a week, or something like that. But isn't it amazing?
Yeah, 30. I've seen people walking around with a ferritin level of 7 and they've felt fine.
Yes.
So, and other people that have it at 40 and they feel horrendous.
Horrendous, yeah.
So, again, it comes back to that.
Iron, for those people don't know, most do, it makes red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen. Without oxygen, you haven't got energy.
No, that's right. So, ferritin level is very important. And but we don't just look at one iron marker. We look at the full iron panel because you can't just extrapolate one marker and say, well, that's fine, so everything's fine. It's not. Sometimes they look at free iron, total iron, and that's fine, but that's pulling it from your ferritin stores. So your ferritin could be low. But there's other reasons that your ferritin could be low or high outside of, your iron status. Yeah. One of them is bacteria. So if you've got a bacterial infection, it's because it can either go high or low. So initially it can go low because bacteria love iron. They love to feed on iron, so they will eat all your iron. So then your body will sequester all your iron away and store it as your ferritin, as your stored iron, to protect your body, protect it from the bacteria that are trying to eat it. So then it will go up. So there's that. If you have some malabsorption issues, so it might not be that I'll say to someone, okay, so what's your diet like? Are you plant-based? Are you eating, high iron-rich foods, red meat, that type of thing? And if they say, yeah, regularly, then I'd have to look at what's their absorption like, their digestion like. So have they got hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid, and they're not absorbing that iron from their food. So there's a lot of things that we look at around these markers. So.
I know, and one of my mates in Melbourne, he's got hemochromatosis, which means they can't regulate iron. They just absorb it all.
Yeah, it builds up and up and up.
Terrible for your liver and stuff. And, he has to watch what he eats.
Yeah.
Well, he should watch what he eats. You listening, Pete?
Should be watching what he's eating. Goodness, yeah. So, that one's a quite... Yeah. So
he's got to look after himself. He's as old as me, so you got to watch that sort of thing. It's primary school together.
Wow, yeah. So, bleeding as well. So bleeding ulcers and things, if you've got low iron, that's a consideration as well.
That's a scary thing because let's say I've decided to, in my arthritis days, I was taking 12 indomethacin a day. Yeah. And my gut was ruined. Now, I was very fatigued then too. Now, I didn't put it till it was the disease making me fatigue, or was the fact that I was bleeding into my gut, not knowing about it, getting it sort of digested, losing blood out of my stool, having a melena. Yeah. It actually could have been that.
Yeah, and that's one thing in our profession. If there's ever any blood in the stool, that's straight to the doctor.
Absolutely.
Straight to the doctor and get it checked because you just don't know. You don't muck around with blood.
Now you're too young, Nick, but every person over 50...
I am too young. I'm not 50, Steve.
I know. But when you reach 50 in about 27 years...
26 and a half,
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I just doing the maths in my head. You get your poop test every 2 years from the doctor, and it comes out from the government.
Yeah.
And you've got to poop and test your poop every 2 years. So it's vitally important to do that because that's an early marker of cancer.
It is, yes. Well, I do a lot of stool analysis, and that's, if there's blood in the stool, I get them to... And a lot of times it can be they have a hemorrhoid, but I will still get them to go to the GP to get it checked anyway because you don't muck around with that.
No.
So, so that could be a cause of low iron as well that you might need to look into. And then we look back to the gut, maybe if they've got, as I said, H. pylori, they could end up with an ulcer. Then that could be bleeding ulcer. So we've got to trace it all back, follow the path back to the beginning to find out the reason why that could be that. What else have I got on here? Let me see. Something that maybe people would know but not think of as an issue or not think of as something that we say, what about our white cell counts? These are really interesting.
White cell count. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so these ones are really interesting. So obviously they're your immune markers.
Cells, yep.
Yeah, immune cells. So we look at those obviously for immunity. So neutrophils, so they have different sort of functions. So neutrophils basically are for bacteria.
Yep.
So if your neutrophils go high, there can be bacterial infections. Lymphocytes are viral. So if you get fighting a virus, you can see that jump up. Monocytes, they basically clean up infections. So they sort of basically go in and sweep everything up. They're like the janitors. So if they go up, there can be a recent infection. This is an interesting one I look at for gut dysbiosis. If anything over 0.6 can indicate that there's some gut dysbiosis going on. So monocytes, you look at as I said before, hypochlorhydria. If there's any issues with hypochlorhydria, you can find monocytes can be involved in that as well. So we look to the gut with monocytes if they go up. And a lot of times I'll do bloods as a standard when I see somebody. Then if we go on to do further functional testing like stool analysis, things like that, I can see a correlation what comes up in the stool, so what's going on in their gut with their monocyte levels. So pretty regularly their monocytes are elevated, there is gut dysbiosis. So yes, a white cell count. If you've got a lower white cell count as well, can be indicative of low zinc. So I had that for a long time. I had neutropenia for a long time.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, it's pretty common in athletes, actually. So my
Not
zinc
a problem
levels.
for me, obviously.
No. Malabsorption as well with the zinc, so it comes back to the gut as well. But increasing your zinc levels can help to push that up a little bit.
So
looking at your zinc and adrenal
deficient.
function as well for low neutrophils. So that's another one I look at.
Sure.
What else have we got there? Liver markers. We can talk a bit about liver markers. No, let's go platelets first because that's interesting. So platelets are basically fragments in our blood that help with our clotting factor, basically. So they can go low for a lot of different reasons. So bone marrow suppression, viral infections, but they can also go high with some viral infections. Interestingly, the big C, when COVID was going around.
Big C.
Yeah, you've had big C.
I've had it.
Yeah, I've had it too.
So remarkable.
So platelets might have gone down, but then they can go up. So platelets was something that we looked at a lot with people that came to us with COVID because of the clotting factor and the heart. So that's something I would look at with COVID patients, and the platelets would actually go up quite significantly.
Now, you've mentioned treatments all the way through your notes here. I mean, there's so many treatments. It's quite complex and that sort of thing. So, I mean, gee whiz.
Yeah, there's
and the liver markers. Now, liver enzymes, when the liver dies, it releases a bunch of enzymes, so you can measure them in the blood. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about here. So we kind of want them to be low, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We want them to be lower. So, we don't want them to be low normal or high normal. We want them to be sort of on the lower end of normal. So they can all mean different things as well. So ALT, I would always look at as being if it's high, it's always an acute issue. And then AST is more chronic, so something that's been going for quite a while, so we can tell a little bit from that. So AST is generally more systemic because it's actually produced in the tissues. So viral, muscle damage, blood pressure medications, things like that can also push it up. So that's going back to asking about medications before we make sort of an analysis of the actual marker. B6 deficiencies as well. That can do it as well.
Yeah, good.
So what are ALP? So ALP can be zinc deficiencies. It can be pernicious anemia. Look at thyroid function with ALP as well. So we look to see what the thyroid's doing as well, because obviously the zinc issues, it takes calcium from the bones as well. So that's something to look at. High ALP levels can indicate some high LPS, so lipopolysaccharide, so that's sort of systemic inflammation. So we look at that. So we're not just looking at that did I mention liver in any of those? So we're looking outside the liver for a lot of these markers.
I know. I'm waiting for the L word to come up.
Yeah. Wow. So a lot of these can be completely different things. Obviously, liver damage as well is a big part of it. And then we look at patterns with your liver as well. So if you see your ALT, your AST, and your GGT all elevated, that can indicate possible heavy metals, pesticides, chronic viruses.
You're getting into the sickness there, aren't you?
Hemochromatosis, you'll see that high.
Hemochromatosis,
This is a fairly common one I see up. ALT and AST elevated together.
Really?
Metabolic syndrome.
Oh, that's a lot of the population.
Yeah.
Wow, because you get fatty liver.
Yeah. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
GGT and ALP, so gallbladder. I see a lot of gallbladder issues.
Do you?
A lot, yeah. So obviously not gallstones and things like that, but as far from a digestive perspective, it shows up all the time.
Wow.
And gallbladder can cause so many issues. Thyroid,
yeah.
Fibromyalgia is involved with that sort of thing as well. So obviously your fat-soluble vitamin deficiencies, things like that. So I would look for gallbladder with those markers that are elevated. AST, ALT, and ALP all elevated is common in celiac disease.
Really?
Yeah.
Because of the okay. Wow.
Yeah. So there's different patterns that we look at. So we don't just look at the markers individually, then we look at them together as patterns and what that may indicate.
So in the old days of going, nope, nothing's out of problem here, you're fine.
You're fine.
It's sort of like,
there's a lot more to it. Yeah.
More to it. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And look, these are all just not saying that this is the case for all these, but these are what we look at. And then if I suspect, okay, maybe there is a gallbladder issue because your GGT and ALP are elevated, then I will do further investigations and look for different patterns or further testing or, talk to the patient about digestion and stools and things like that to sort of put the picture together. So, so it's not as simply just looking at the marker.
I know, and all right, I'm going to hit you with a question here that I haven't asked you about. But if there was a blood test that you could order that they said, okay, Nic, you're allowed to order one blood test or a group of blood tests just in the same area, not everything. What do you think is something that the people are probably under testing for, or something you'd like to test for more regularly?
Oh, gee,
I know, tricky.
Yeah, well, something that GPs don't test.
Yeah?
Well, I think thyroid panels is a big one.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I love
so you mentioned panel
yeah.
because normally you just get a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. It should be 0.5 to 4.
Yeah.
If it's 3.9, you're fine, go away. Is that it?
Yeah, that's totally it. Yeah.
TSH is not even a thyroid hormone.
It's not a thyroid hormone, no. It's not. No, definitely not. So I will get that a lot. I'll get just a TSH. As in, I won't order one, but they'll come to me with bloods and a TSH is all that's been ordered, if it even has been looked at.
Yeah.
So what happens is they're in GP, so they'll measure TSH. If that comes back high or low, they will then be allowed to measure T4. And then if T4 comes back out of range, then they'll measure T3. So they've got to go through a process.
And then you've got to measure free T3 and free T4.
Free T3, free T4.
And reverse T3.
Yeah, and even thyroid antibodies as well. Yeah. So
isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So
that you have to go through that rigmarole to get to the... Because T3 and T4 are thyroid hormones. You want them to be freed up.
That's right.
So that's the most important. What a good test. My test would be one that doesn't... It's used in university, but calcitonin gene-related peptide. It's a hormone that's in the blood. You can measure for it. It's been measurable for about 30 to 40 years. It's severely linked to headache disorders like migraines, all these things. 18% of women get migraines, 6% of men. And because I've suffered with them in the past, cluster headaches and that sort of thing, that would be my ideal blood test. It doesn't even, it only exists at universities.
Yeah.
Why we can't? You can test for it. It's a known chemical.
Yeah.
And universities do it, but not simple blood tests. And wouldn't that be great? Because people are getting headaches, which is probably one of the most common things people go to. And what is it? If it's that thing, we now know that there are natural and orthodox treatments that reduce that one chemical. Ginger does it.
Yeah, ginger's
and
great
butterbur. They're the two herbs that reduce that chemical.
Yeah.
So, imagine being able to really identify... Because, people say they get headaches and you go, is that real headache? You can't... There's no blood test for a headache.
No.
It's just like you just have to look at them and believe them.
Yeah.
And isn't that wild? Because... you could easily ring up work and say, I've got a headache today, I can't come in. That's very common.
Well, it's not even... It's only a symptom, isn't it? It's not even a sign, so you can't even outwardly see...
No. If I lost a limb, you'd see it. But if you've got a headache, it's a hidden disease. And I'd love to be able to test for that.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. Homocysteine, although I did hear something today about homocysteine that I think it's becoming... I don't think it's been put on the list, but I think it might be going on the list. So the scheduled list to be able to be just a standard test. So homocysteine...
My mother has had a heart attack, so I guess...
I think it's a very important marker for multiple reasons. Obviously, homocysteine, methylation, all that sort of thing. So I think that'd be another really good one that we could get as a standard test.
Standard test, yeah, absolutely. Screen the world. Imagine that, giving everyone a blood test once a year.
Well, that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we should talk about how often should you get blood tests.
We were going to talk about that.
Yeah, some people, are sort of chronic blood test getters. So they get them a lot.
Once a year.
Yeah, once a year. So once a year is what I recommend to clients. Just it gives you keeps track of things, but you're not overdoing it. And sort of you can take 3 to 4 months for things to shift. So once a year I think is really good. Obviously, if you've got ongoing issues or you've got something that you're addressing, then you want to do more regular testing to see if things are shifting. But once a year, I usually recommend to my clients, if they come to me and they bring blood tests that are 3 years old, I say, look, it's probably not relevant at this point in time to where you're at now. So it doesn't tell me much. So within a year, though, I'll say, yeah, we can have a look at it and see.
Unless it's genetic marker.
Yeah, that's right.
Like my HLA-B27. But, that won't change. You can test me every time and I'll be positive for that. It's ridiculous, yeah. So that's remarkable. I mean, look at all... I mean... When you were talking about a list, I'm going, oh, my God, that's right. I mean, I don't see patients anymore, thank goodness, because there's so much...
There's a lot in it.
There's so much to this, Nic.
So if you have a blood test in your hand at home, there is a lot of information in that. So if your GP's looked at it, you don't feel right or you think there's something not right, and you've got this blood test and your GP said everything's all right, just remember there's a lot more information in there than what you're actually just seeing on the numbers. So
and if you have a blood test, ask for the results. They're your results.
100%. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because so often I hear, well, the GP said that everything's fine and he won't give them to me.
Your results.
A lot. Your results.
Really?
So they're actually your property.
Your Medicare swipey paid for that.
Yeah, that's right. So you have every right to get them. And I say to people, obviously don't get up your doctor, but just email them politely and say, I would like a copy. If they refuse, say, you can go back and say they are my property. It happens a lot. They just won't. They won't. I don't know why they don't like to release them. I mean, a lot of times they won't release them unless you've gone back and seen them, and that's fair, I suppose, because they have to, go over the test with you. But once you've seen them and they've said everything's fine, you're within your rights to get a copy. So just, keep pushing for that if they won't give it to you, because you are allowed to get a copy. Jeez. And I think it's a good idea anyway for your own records. Yeah. And if, something does happen down the track and you start to feel a bit unwell, then you've got them to bring to any practitioner that you see. So definitely get copies. What else can we talk about? I think that's pretty much, we've covered a lot. I think we were just trying to highlight what you can actually get out of a blood test. Amazing, and so don't take away from your GP if you feel like you're not 100% and they're saying everything's fine. Yep. Get someone to look at your bloods a little bit closer.
Nic, and you're the best person for doing this. It's great. But look, this has been amazing. It really
I mean, we're nerds, so we love all this sort of stuff.
I love it all. And I'm going to get a blood test because I've already booked in. So next week it'll be fun.
Oh, yes. You have to bring him in, Steve.
I'll show you.
I'm curious.
Nothing.
Yeah, every time that I have a friend or family member says they're getting bloods, I'm like, can you get a copy? I want to have a look. I love it. I do it from
I'll probably have high urea. There you go. There's a prediction.
Oh, there you go.
Put that to camera because of the type of protein that I eat. Yeah. And the exercise I do. So there's a guess.
There you go. We'll see if you're right.
I bet you I am.
I reckon you would be.
I wanted to be over 10 too. No, I can't. I'm not that good.
No.
All right. I'll bring them in. All right.
Yeah, so hopefully that helps some people out there. And, let us know if you want more stuff like this or anything else you want us to talk about.
Give us feedback.
Let us know what you want to hear.
All right. Well, we'll catch up with you guys next week.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nic.
Thanks, Steve.
See you next week.
See you guys.